Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone watching me today. Thank you very much for joining my session. I really appreciate it. So let me start sharing my screen and start the presentation. So as my picture, I'm John Nagib, and I'm going to speak to you about today the SharePoint 2013 performance and capacity management. So who I am? I'm a senior consultant and portfolio architect working for HP, Hewlett Packard. I'm active in writing wikis, blogs, and forums. I have several certificates from Microsoft, MCITP, MCPD, MCTS, and MCT, and TOGAF Foundation 9.1 from the Open Group. This is my blog, this is my Twitter, and this is my TechNet profile. So the agenda we are going to cover for today is having a little introduction, then talking about capacity planning, then performance monitoring, capacity management, performance optimizations, and doing some demos about some tools that can be helpful for you while doing the performance and capacity management. Then sharing with you extra slides, and we'll be having time for questions. So starting this, you see this, I believe most of you will be familiar about this uh, look of the SharePoint. This is how it looks to the end user. So what the end users care about is this nice interface, so he can do his job from sharing documents, so making tasks and sharing the calendar events and so on, wherever tasks done through this SharePoint interface. But for the SharePoint consultants and operations, this image is different a little bit. To make it appear with this fancy interface to the users, the consultants and the operations team needs to do a lot of effort and to configure a lot of stuff in the background for the end user and the business user, so you can make benefit of the SharePoint in platform. So this is a sophisticated environment you're seeing here, DMZ environments, SQL, Mail, Visual Studio, Internet access, a lot of stuff in here, several machines for the SharePoint, and so on. So this is how it looks like in the background. And to handle all this, we need to take care of some points. Let me first walk you through a brief about the topology of SharePoint, which is called the traditional topology. So we're having in SharePoint, Microsoft introduced the topology since started from a few years, for especially with the SharePoint 2010 and before with the MOS. So we're having three layers. The web server layers, which is the front end, WFEs, which the requests coming from the browsers receive this and handle it back to the client. And there is the other layer, which is the application servers that's running all the services applications like the performance point, like Excel service, like search, and so on, or with the rest of all the service applications that exists. And the third layer is called the SharePoint database, which contains all the databases related to the SharePoint. So this is called the traditional topology. There's a new topology that Microsoft introduced with SharePoint 2013 is streamlined topology. You see in here, instead of having three layers, we are having in here four layers. The first layer is called distributed cache and request management. So what is distributed cache? Distributed cache is a new rule of service that Microsoft introduced, which is important for social networking features and for its authentication, authorization. So it stores data about the user and keep it on this layer. So also there is a new rule which is called request management server. So this request management, it acts like the load balancer, so by some sort, where it help you to direct requests to certain front ends based on certain weights. So you can have this layer as a separate layer, or you can put it on the front end and layers. But for the streamlined topology, we are having the distributed cache and request management on a separate layer. So second layer is a normal one, which is the front end servers, and then we're having the patch processing servers rule, which needs a lot of patching, processing a background, like the session and so on. And then there is another layer for specialized workload, like performance point, which takes a lot of load and consumes a lot of resources. And then the database layer. So this new topology is called streamlined topology. Moving into an important point, so which is capacity planning. So to talk about the performance and capacity management, we need to give a brief introduction about the capacity planning. So if you're having a new environment and you're having new customer and you're building a new farm, and you need new architecture. So you need to make the capacity planning initially. And how to do that? So starting with, if for example we took the standard topology, which is having the web front ends and service rules and database. So we need to figure out the number of the front ends that we need. And there is an important point in here that need to talk about is something called requests per second, so RPS. So assuming that each server can handle 100 RPS, so for example, if we know or we calculate it by some way, like I will be showing you later, if we are having 600 RPS, this means that we need to have 6 front ends. So to calculate the RPS, either we use existing data or we just put an assumption if you are not having this existing one. And to calculate the RPS, there is a formula for that. So without going into much into details, seen here we're having the total number of unique users and the concurrent users percentage and requests we get per day for each user. And we're having a peak usage ratio. If we do this, apply this last line of equation, we get the average RPS. And based on this RPS, we can put an estimate for the front ends. Continuing with the capacity planning, so for the app server's capacity planning, there are a lot of approaches actually in here. But for me, I would like to start with 2 application servers dedicated to query processing components and index partitions, and place all the other service application on a separate application server. And based on utilization, so when you uh, start monitoring your servers, you can add additional application servers that are configured similarly, or add application servers to dedicated resource to specific services. So, so service that consumes resources like performance point actually. So if you're having performance point, you would need to have that on a separate servers. And of course search. If search started to increase the number of the number of items you crawl, so 10, 40, 100, so each of those is having a separate case. So, and I'm giving you a reference in here in the slide of the architectures related to the search piece. So covering this, we covered a very small brief about the capacity planning. So what's next? If you planned your environment and you're having it running, you need to monitor it to make sure that the design, the architecture you have put is working fine. And if it needs some tweaking, you need to take actions to enhance it. So we need to monitor some stuff. So what we need to monitor in here to make sure that our environment is working fine and properly. You see in here, we're having several things that needs to be monitored. So first thing is performance counter. So what's performance counter? Performance counter on every Windows server, you're having some metrics, some data that is generated, like the processor time, the memory usage, the processor usage, the ASP.NET recycles, a lot of metrics that can be generated, and there's tool I'm going to show you how to catch those counters. Second thing is slow pages. So you need to track it through the IS logs to see which page is taking a long time, to see what to investigate, why it's taking a long time, and so on. Then we're having the software boundaries. SharePoint is having its software boundary as a platform, as an environment. So there are a number of site collections that you can have, number of web applications, number of users, etc. You need to take care of that and take a look into it. And then the RBS, which we talked about already. Continuing on what to monitor specifically, those are the important counters that Microsoft are specifying that needs to be monitored. The processor time, the disk average disk queue length, idle time, free space for disk, memory. There are several metrics for memory available: megabytes, cache faults per second, pages per second, paging file, and so on. So there are important 16 counters that you need to take care of. Or how to monitor. Uh, There are several tools. SCOM, System Center Operations Manager. So Microsoft is producing this product where you can monitor things and in your environment integrated. It's a separate product than SharePoint. There are third-party products, several companies. I'm not going to talk about it, but if you do in your investigations, you'll find there are a lot of big companies that are having third parties. Moving to the free option for you available without any cost, so the performance monitor dataset collectors that I'm going to show you. And if you can develop few line of PowerShell scripts and export it to CSV files, which you can monitor this performance counters. And there is another option you can have is add to counter to the usage database for the SharePoint and start using a certain tool to get this data from this usage database. Moving into how to monitor. Yeah. Number two, so this is another slide for monitoring tools. There is from SQL Server side, there is an important tool which is SQL Server Profiler. So whenever you're having any operations running on the SharePoint, which is continuous thing, you can open this SQL Server Profiler tool and see what's being accessed through from SharePoint and hitting which database and the time taken and what queries are being hit. So this can give you um, idea of what's happening. This can help you in your investigations. But be careful, don't try the information you will get from SQL Profiler about the databases and the tables names. Don't try to manipulate any of these tables. It's not allowed by Microsoft. It's prohibited, and you'll lose supporting your environment. But Microsoft may ask you if for any reason you raised a ticket with them, they'll ask you for maybe yet to generate the SQL Server Profiler and open it and generate the log for it for them. Another thing you can monitor is how to monitor is the IIS logs. There are several tools like log parsers free from Microsoft where you can do some queries for in the IIS logs and get the data you would like to see, like the RBS data. It can be generated from the IIS logs, like the slowest pages, like the number of users. So a lot of stuff you can generate from the IIS logs. Then moving into capacity planning limits, so there you can have your own PowerShell scripts, you can develop your tools, or you can use manual ways to check the capacity planning limits for the SharePoint environment, which is actually the software boundaries. So for the capacity management benefit, if you generated all this data and you have all this counters data, then you can go and check and have this table in front of you. This is a very important table. So I'll be taking examples in here. So if I monitor the counters like the processor time, and if I see that the uh, persistently greater than 75%, so in this case I need to upgrade the processor, add additional processors or additional servers. If I go, for example, for the available megabytes, if it's less than 2 gigs on the front ends, so I need to add memory or remove unnecessary services, and so on. And in this table, you'll find a detailed information about the each counter and what bottleneck you can face or you can see in your environment and what actions you need to take to resolve this bottleneck. Let me go to the first part of the demos that I'm going to make today. Let me jump into my virtual machine. And the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to open SharePoint Management Shell. Let me clear this. And I'm having a PowerShell script. Let me show you that. It's called log counters. Let me open it. See, three simple lines where I generate data is coming from those counters that I'm monitoring. You see in here, I get the counters, and there is another file called counters WFE. Let me show you this file. See in here, I monitor specific counters like the rejected request from ASP.NET, and this can gives me indicator about what's happening if there is issues with my front ends rejecting requests. So this means I may need to add another front ends. So in here in this text file, I have put all the counters that I need to monitor, and then from the other PowerShell file, I access those counters. I generated this data. I export it to a CSV file. So let me go to the SharePoint management shell and run this log counter PowerShell. So this will take few seconds. If you increase in here the maximum samples, if you see, and the sample interval, this can take much more time. And you can put a scheduled timed timer job for running this log counter across all your day. So maybe you run it several times per day, maybe two times, three, four, 5 times. It's up to you the schedule of running these counters, and you can combine all these CSV files generated, and then you can create a graph. So let me go and show you the sample that was generated. You see in here, it's telling me these counters and then giving me the number of these counters that was hit. So the processor time, the available megabytes, so this around 3 gigs. So 3 gigs didn't hit the limit of 2 gigs, so my memory is fine, and so on. So knowing this counters that we generated and having the table that I have shown you in my slides, you can simply take actions of what needs to be done in your environment to enhance it. Set collector. There is a tool in the Windows called Performance Monitor. So you see in here there is a counter processor time. Let me maximize this. And this start to track my processor, how it's behaving. So I can generate a dataset from this. I can export it to a file called plg.plg file with extension plg, and it will give me indication. And then I can use another tool which is called pal.codeplex. It's a free tool available over Codeplex called pal. It's a very nice tool. So let me walk you through this one. If I go and open the one of the PLG files I have, just press next. You can set the parameters as you would like. It will take time to do analysis over the PLG file that I generated from the performance monitor tool. It will generate a HTML file for me. In this file, you'll see that it's talking about each of those conditions or counters that we talk about, the memory page bytes, and it will tell you if the condition is not satisfied or there is something wrong with this counter. It will show you in here in red. But since it's green, so everything looks fine. So from this analysis, the tool analyzes the counters that you generated from the performance monitor and give you indication if what's wrong with your environment, if you're having issues and so on. Let me move to the next demo. There is a tool called the Diagnostic Studio. This tool mainly was used for the SharePoint 2010 environment, uh, but it can be used. I tested it with SharePoint 2013 and it works. So with this tool, it can give you indication about the HTTP request you're having. It can give you the capacity if you're having in here the CPUs. It can generate the report about the CPUs for you, the performance counters. So it's a very nice tool. We can give you the same graphs that we have generated from the performance monitor and from the PAL tools. So Diagnostic Studio is free and available over Microsoft site. Oh, this is the first piece of the demo that I wanted to make for you today. Let me go and continue with my slides, and we'll be having another set of demos. So moving into another topic, it's the performance optimization. So what I need to do to optimize my performance. Take care of one important thing. You need to have 1 millisecond latency between your SQL and SharePoint. Otherwise, SharePoint is not going to work. And need to take care that needs to have 20 milliseconds latency to retrieve the first byte from the SharePoint. And this can be done with tool like traceroute and pinging the connection between the SharePoint and SQL. So take care of that while uh, deciding about where you are going to put the SQL and how far is it from the SharePoint servers. Is it on the same router? Is it on the same switch? And so on. So are you using fiber optics? Oh, stretched farm. So this is a concept. There is a concept called stretched farm. What I mean by stretched farm that in SharePoint 2010 there was an option where you can host a piece of the environment on one data center and the other piece on the other data center. In SharePoint 2013, Microsoft prohibited that unless you are satisfying these both conditions, the 1 millisecond latency and the 20 millisecond latency. Actually, in the beginning of SharePoint 2013, Microsoft was prohibiting that, but they modified it and say it's okay and supported if you are going to satisfy those two conditions, the 1 millisecond latency and the 20 millisecond latency. So, and you need to take care of the minimum and software and hardware requirements for the SharePoint. So minimum, you need to have 12 gigs for the SharePoint server, 16 gigs for SQL Server. But of course, this depends and varies from the one size to another. So from one client to another. So this depends on the deployment size. Next thing, so in the performance optimization, you need to create SQL alias. So never ever use the full database names and while you are configuring the environment. You need to create an alias. So there is a tool called the CLI config.exe where you can put a specific name like database, content databases, and this alias which you are going to configure in your SharePoint, and this alias is in the background is having the full connection on your behalf. So in case you need to modify the server, the alias will be having the same name within SharePoint, but just you will be modifying the connection in the background. So SharePoint will not be feeling what you are the change you are making, so it will not affect you. Disable loopback check. So this is an important piece. So whenever you have it on the Windows server, inside the Windows server, this something will allow you. So when you access these SharePoint sites from the SharePoint servers, you need to disable the loopback so it will work properly. You need to have the latest OS updates. You need to have the service packs. You need to use hardware load balancers. So it's important piece. Or if you're not having the budget, you can use the network load balancer available over Windows servers. But hardware load balancers is an important piece where you can manage the load between your front ends. So what's hardware load balancer? Without mentioning companies, but there are a lot of there's companies, important companies working in this area. Uh, so if you're having 3 or 4 front ends and you need to distribute the load, so whenever a user is hitting these servers, you need to specify which server it goes. So the load balancer does this on your behalf. It checks the health of the available server and send the request to the free available server without affecting and impacting the performance. So load balancer distribute the requests coming from the users all over your environment. So it's important to have those log files on different disks than the primary one. So it's important thing from the database side you need to, and from the SharePoint side too, on both you need to have the log files separate from the system disk. You have to have your own strategy for naming convention for your service accounts, services, database names, everything you name in and configure in SharePoint needs to be having a very strong naming conventions. So you need to figure out your own strategy for having that. You need also to optimize your performance to disable any unused Windows service like spoiler audio services, tablet input, and so on. Warm-up scripts. So in the morning, everything when you recycle your application pools over IIS, and if the user is hitting the first user is hitting your environment, he's feeling that the environment is very very slow for him. So you need to have warm-up scripts which runs over the SharePoint front ends and do this first initial hitting of the server sites on the user's behalf, so that whenever user is going to access the sites, he'll not feel that it's slow because it was loaded and cached already. Set quotas on web applications. So there is a boundary and Microsoft recommendations that you need to have your uh, uh, site collection content or the database that carries the site collection and web apps. It's called content database. Each content database needs not to exceed the 200 gigs. If you are going to exceed 200 gigs, there are a lot of precautions you need to take care of. So it's advised to set quotas in your sites. So for example, you are going to give the users 2 gigs only for this site and so on. So you need to identify the quota for each site for the user on the web applications. Moving into performance optimization, you need to compress your files. The log files, there are a lot of available tools, free ones. We can compress log files, you need to compress the IIS requests. This is done through IIS. Caching. There are a lot of type of caching that you need to enable. Uh, it's in addition to the distributed cache I'm talking about, there is another type of caches like the prop cache, like the page output cache. All these cache needs to be enabled so SharePoint will performance will be optimized. And whenever users hitting large data, this data will be cached on the server side, so the user will feel that the performance is very good. Avoid long backup jobs. So if you are running long backup jobs on the evening, try to avoid that and keep them away from the SharePoint servers. Code check. So if you're having your company deploying code over your environments, you need to have a very strict code policy check. There are a lot of available tools that can do that for you. Microsoft used to have a tool called SP Dispose Check that can check the code against memory leaks and so on. So you need to make sure that your code is clean while you're deploying it to your environment. Moving into the next piece of my demo, so I'm going to show you some tools. First one is the developer dashboard. So moving into my environment, this is the central admin site. If I go and click in here, there is a something called developer dashboard that Microsoft introduced. You can enable it through PowerShell scripts. This developer dashboard actually give you idea about which server is running, the CPU time it takes to load this page, the duration, which server is serving your requests, the IP address that the client is using, and so on. A lot of information. So it can give you even the request a lot of data because let me show you in here the SQL. So it's even showing you what procedures are being hit by these pages. It's going to show you the logs, a lot of good information that can help you to track your environment and watch it and see it. The second tool I'm going to show you is called SQL Profiler. I talked about it in the slide, but let me open it for you. It's part of the SQL Server tools. If I open, I need to have a new trace. Let me connect to my database server and select the template. So I am going to um, have the SP counts and press run. You see in here, let me stop that. In this page, you'll see that it's showing you what's going on, which database is being hit while you are working, what SharePoint actually is making on your behalf, which database are active and working on. So if I was doing more robust information, so this will generate for us the SQL queries and so on. So it will tell you which database is being hit now in the background. So for example, the SharePoint config and so on. So it will show you the database that are being hit in the background, the queries and so on. So this is useful while you are doing your own troubleshooting. And if you're having case with Microsoft, they will ask you mostly to generate this SQL Server profiler so they can able to trace what issues is happening and if there is issue with your database and so on. Let me go back to my slides. So in here in the slides you see I'm writing for you in here the command that you need to put to enable the developer dashboard and the other side SQL profiler. So the next tool is the health analyzer. So if I open this SharePoint Central Admin, let me go to the monitoring. You will see in here that something called health analyzer, and underneath it you'll see problem and solutions. So this will show you a report of the what problems you are having on your own environment and what solutions you can have. So it takes time to load. And actually can review the definitions of the rules that are used to analyze your environment. So this is taking a little bit more time, but I wanted to show you how to use it. So you can go through monitoring and then review problems and solutions. So mostly it will be providing you the issues you face in your environment. If you're having issues with the distributed cache, if you're having issues with the disk space and so on. So there are a lot of rules and definitions you can check on later, and it will be helpful to you. So it's taking time. I'm not sure what's wrong with the environment, but let's proceed with other demos until it loads. Fiddler tool. This is a third-party tool by Telerik, and it's a very important one. Let me show you this. So Fiddler will show you what's being hit from the request, where is your request going, and what is the status of your request, if it's doing good or there is something wrong, and so on. So you can do a lot of tracking and a lot of information in here while you are tracking your environment. So this is the Fiddler, and it's showing you, and if the result is 404, for example, it will appear in here, and you can start doing your investigations. So let me go back to the central admin. You see in here there's a problems and solutions page opens, and it's telling me in here that there is a driver, my driver is running out of space. So it will show in you in here what issues you are facing now. And by the way, some of these issues you need to track them because there is certain rule definitions, maybe it's false alarm, so, and it differs from case to case. So you need to be aware about these rules that's really impacting you, and you need to do your own investigations. So I've shown you the Fiddler SQL profiler. Yeah, for log parser in here, as I mentioned to you, there is the RPS, and to monitor it, there is a tool called log parser. I'm not going into details into this log parser, but I'm referencing in here a lot of blogs and important links for you to go through it, how to use the log parser tool, so you'll be able to generate the RPS. Moving into another important tool, which is called the SIS, or SharePoint Engineering Troubleshooting Helper. This tool is available over Microsoft sites, and the Microsoft engineers, if you are having ticket with them, they will advise you to run it and generate the reports for them and upload it somewhere for them so they can start investigation. And actually, it's important for you to know about it too. You can download it, and let me open it for you. It's an exe that you will run and will start gathering information for you. And actually, once done, it will generate some reports for you, uh, like this one. So this result, let me show you the result of it. And here it will generate a CAF file for you, and this CAF file contains a lot of information. Oh, let me go and get it. I extracted one of the files that was generated by the sys tool. It will tell you what errors and what warnings you're having. So for example, it will tell you in here you're having an issue with the root certificates, and you need to put it on the local store. And it may give you even, at some cases, some links that you can check. So, and will tell you all the issues you're having in your environment and the rule name and how to resolve it. So it's a very powerful tool. So if I go to the wizard in here, I'll check. You see in here, this is the sys tool, or the software engineering tool. You need to accept it. You need to follow the steps. And once finished, it'll take a few time. So maybe several minutes, can reach up to 10-15 minutes maybe, and it will generate these reports for you. It's a very helpful tool, and you can use it to track the issues you are having in your environment, so you can resolve it. So this is the sys, and I'm putting in here a sample of the report that attached, that was extracted. Moving to our third-party tools in here, this one is called SPS Farm, and it's free and it's available over Codeplex. It's a command line tool. So leaving the sys, I'm going to cancel it, and let me go back to the demos. So SPS Farm report is an exe file, uh, or the old version was in exe, and then you're having here PowerShell for it. So once you run this SPS farm report, it will generate a report for you like this one. Let me show it for you. I hope that I was having it opened. I don't have it opened in front of me, but I am having a screenshot for it in here. The SPS farm report, it will generate a report about your farm and gives you indication what servers you are having, what rules you are having in your environment, everything. It's detailed information. So maybe you ask why I need such thing. So if you're having an environment and you need to take a backup of everything, just in case something happen, you need to take care of the configurations that are existing. So whenever issue is happening in your environment, you need to look back into these reports and retrieve all the configurations you have done. So it's some sort of way that you can keep the configurations and the topology of your farm. So it's an important tool. Another one which is not free and it's called the SP Kit. It will generate a very good report for you. It's full, this like this one. I'm opening it and showing it to you now. It will give you a farm documentation. Every single piece of your environment will be generated by this tool, but it's not free. So this tool will show you the available data and so on. A lot of data you're having, the admin contents and so on. A lot of data it will be generated by this farm report. Last tool is the Visual Studio. So, but take care is the Visual Studio you need to have to do a performance test. So if you're having your environment and you'd like to have to make some sort of load testing in your environment, Visual Studio is providing this option. But to do that, you need to have the ultimate edition of the Visual Studio. There is a specific template for doing performance test against the SharePoint site, where you can put some scenarios and then you can specify the number of users to simulate, and it will start running on your behalf, so you can monitor the servers and how they are um, behaving while having all this load. So Visual Studio is a tool that can help you in doing the performance test. So in here I've done my presentation. Hope you like it. In here I'm putting you extra slides. This reference to my TechNet articles. In here reference to my TechNet galleries sharings and some of my writing over my HP official blogs. So in here I'm putting you my contacts again. Thank you very much for your time, and I believe now it's time for questions. Thank you.